Okay, welcome everyone. So I think we should start probably right on 6 o'clock. Thank you everyone for making time available to talk about this very important topic. Just to give some context to today's webinar, or E-Talanoa, it comes. Well, Talanoa is a term which is quite prevalent in the Pacific because it actually is very much based in the Pacific, particularly in the eastern part and the Polynesian parts. Well, that's probably eastern's not a great description, but essentially it's a process that describes, or Talanoa describes, a process of dialogue where people are able to express their views, and it's in an atmosphere of mutual respect. I'm really glad that we've got really good speakers to talk about the topic of ICT for better education. And as the theme says, we want to look beyond technology as such and ask the question whether e-learning experiences have been encouraging, productive, and better than conventional ways of learning. So, and this not only includes students, but teachers as well. So the question is, how are we doing? And today we've got 4 speakers or 5 speakers to lead us through that process. So what I'll do is I'll introduce each speaker. Well, I suppose I should introduce all of the speakers straight away. Thank you very much to Gail Townsend, who's currently Education Specialist with the United Nations Children's Fund, or UNICEF, in the Pacific. Gail previously worked for the Ministry of Cook Islands, Ministry of Education in the Cook Islands, and was the secretary there, but also spent 20 years there working in the areas of curriculum development, advisory services, teacher training, policy and planning, and eventually actually became the secretary or the head of the ministry. So, and after Gail, we'll have Artilla Devi, who is the Education and Partnership Manager at Catalpa International in the E-Learning for Science in the Pacific program, which is based in Fiji. So welcome, Artilla. Artilla's worked across all universities in Fiji, taught in the classroom and held administrative and management positions in the education sector. Their full biographies are actually on that email that I sent out earlier, so I'm just giving a bit of a summary. And we've got the Honourable Siaosu Sovaleni, Minister of Education and Training. Welcome, Siaosu, and hello. I haven't seen you for a long time since you were working at SPC in your role, but since then it looks like you've been very active. You're currently the Minister of Education and Training in Tonga, and you've been very involved in the political sense with heading up various committees, for example, climate change, environment and sustainable development. And also prior to that, you was formerly Deputy Prime Minister in Tonga from 2014 to 2017, and was very active in setting up the Tonga CERT, led the development of new Communications Act, Communications Commissions Act, and new Cybercrime Bill. So Siaosu has played a very instrumental role in ICTs over the past, I wouldn't say 10, 20 years. I first met Siaosu way back in Hawaii in around 2002, and he's already working in that area. So welcome, Siaosu. It's great to have you on board. And I'm not sure if Alipati is with us, Alipati Taupo, who's an e-learning champion from Tuvalu. He's currently serving under the Tuvalu's Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports as the Senior Education Officer for ICT. Now, as well as that, we've got Ian Thomson and Andrew Ebbs, who are championing the e-education SIG in PIC-ISOC. So thanks for their participation. They've been helping me and Sherry's putting together the program. So thank you very much for that. So without further ado, I will hand over to Gail for her to talk. Also should recognise PIC ISOC's board for putting this E-Talanoa together, and want to thank them for making it possible. Okay, so let's hand over to Gail. Thank you, Gail. So you have the floor. You can share your screen, and we look forward to what you've got to say. Thank you.
Kia ora katoa. First of all, thank you very much to the Internet Society for arranging this event and for the opportunity, and a particular malo italava to the Minister. It's very humbling to be on a panel of someone who is so experienced and so passionate about education in our region. So thank you very much. I will keep this predominantly actually about my work in the Cook Islands as opposed to the current work, because we do have Tonga and Tuvalu on the panel, and they have been doing some wonderful things, particularly in response to COVID-19 and the use of IT in recent times. So I wouldn't want to comment on their work. So just a bit of background of where I've been engaged with e-learning, and it was with the Cook Islands, and it did start with paper. And it was due to a complete shortage in our isolated islands of teachers, specialists in technical subjects, and particularly science, which was mine. So we started with providing paper, then we made the big move to Skype. So we had it where we would have teachers in the main island actually Skyping into students individually in our remote islands and working through the workbooks with them. Then as technology let us do more, it did more. So the ministry moved to actually have a couple of initially part-time staff members, and I can say this is a great way to use somebody who's perhaps on study leave but still wants to do a bit of work, or a female teacher who happens to be on maternity leave but wants to keep engaging with the classroom. It's a great way to use those skills and not lose them. But eventually it grew even more and went to full-time staffing, which started at the ministry but moved to a school. So the person the teacher of the online classroom remained a teacher based in a school. So they still had that supporting structure of a school around them. And obviously then there's the e-learning part that UNICEF has been involved with as part of the COVID response. Now, when Ian sent us the question that said, why hasn't e-learning, and now I can't read it properly, why hasn't e-learning worked as we expected it to? And I really thought about that, because there was a lot of times that we almost gave up on our e-learning classroom. And so what I actually thought about is, did we know what we wanted to start with? We had this great idea. We were going to go out and have remote classrooms, and it was going to be awesome, and no kid was going to miss out, and it was, everybody would be reached. But had we really thought about that? Did we really know what we expected and wanted e-learning to do? And did we ask the right questions about what we needed? And I think it actually came down to more of, we didn't know what we didn't know. And so in terms of the learning, and I will keep this short, in terms of the learning, these would say the things I think we needed to think about more. One was hardware. We thought we've got internet connection and we've got computers at the other end, but that wasn't enough. Did we have headphones for the kids at the other end? Did we have scanners if they'd done diagrams or paintings that they could scan their work and share it back with their teacher? Did we have printers? How were we going to deal with redundancy? Because in general, we were using e-learning for students who were geographically remote from the main islands, as I would say is the majority of users in the Pacific. So if we are doing that, what do we do when something breaks down? Because it's going to take a really long time to get a replacement. What do we do when something happens to the satellite dish and the internet goes off for weeks at a time? And we hadn't thought, school just stopped for a while, but we learnt the next year, we made sure there were things set up in advance that could still continue if we weren't able to be in touch with them. Did we think properly about software? And for people thinking about this, all I can say is there is so much out there. Do your homework, really question people who are suppliers. If you're not using open source, people who are suppliers of software, and make sure you get something that is going to work for you and that is flexible enough for you to be able to change it when you need to. Then the actual education system, because, you know, this was quite a change and education systems weren't really ready for it. So had we talked about staff, you know, had we thought about staffing, and as I said, our staffing evolved. So the teachers actually had mainstream classrooms in the school they were in, but then also had these e-learning classrooms within their timetable. The setup costs and the ongoing costs, if you've got annual licenses and things to worry about, you need to be able to sell that to your budget committee as part of your education budget. And I think importantly too, monitoring and evaluation. It was all very well to set it up and have it started, but how were we making sure these kids were getting the same opportunities to learn as students who had a face-to-face teacher? And I have to say, we would, you know, in the end we were using learning management systems, and we would have, a teacher would have a classroom of students from multiple islands all come and join the class at the beginning and then go into little breakout rooms, so the teacher would move around. So not different from group work in a school, but still different. And then last but not least, and definitely to me the most important one, is did we think about the people? So this was, were our students ready? Did they have the capacity to have a level of self-management of their learning? They were predominantly lower secondary school. Were our schools ready? And this was, many times there were some lines of communication that got a bit blurred between the school the student was physically sitting in, because they still went to school every day, and the school where the teacher that was teaching them was also sitting. So there were timetable clashes, and the principal moved something and the teacher turned up and there were no kids there, and all those kinds of things. So making sure that those lines of communication are in place and the lines of monitoring student well-being were in place. Do our parents know what's going on? Because they really weren't so sure about their kids going to school and spending the whole day on the computer. I mean, what was that? You know, that wasn't learning, for goodness sake. So we had to make sure that everybody understood how it was going to work and what was going to be needed to make it happen. And one of the things we did learn to put in place fairly early on, and I hope Alipati really does make it, because he'll be able to share Tuvalu's experience on, was we realised we couldn't just leave kids to get on with it. And so the ministry actually found some more funding from somewhere and employed additional staff, not trained teachers, but people in the community who had perhaps been involved with youth groups or Sunday schools, or who had some idea of being able to just keep kids moving along. We made sure those people had some training so they could help if something did happen with the IT system, but mainly it was about training in terms of supporting kids to engage with the learning, contextualize it for them, help with language, and just when the teacher was off with a different group, be there to keep those kids ticking over and to act as that point of liaison between the e-learning teacher and the physical school teacher and the families, to make sure that families were working with it. One thing I think it did really help with is that many of these students then had to come to Rarotonga, to the main island, for senior secondary school. And because they'd had that relationship with a teacher in a school when they got here, and actually with each other when they were in the big classroom, when they got to the main island, there was some support for them already. They didn't feel quite so new or not knowing what was going on. So that was certainly an unintended outcome, but a very, very valuable outcome to what's happened. So thank you. I was told to keep it short. I hope I've stayed within my time.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Gail. That was really great. At this juncture, I just would like to point out that if you want to see a text version of what's being spoken on the text, I'll repaste it on the text very soon. So I'll do that soon. I'll just like to welcome Peter Nicholas from Peter Nichols from the Asian Development Bank. Welcome, Peter, and thank you for dropping in and having a listen to the E-Talanoa on e-education. Also, if you've got any questions, please put them into the chat, and sometimes the presenter themselves actually just respond to those questions, and if not, I'll pick them up and maybe throw them into the mix when we have our open session. All right, well, I don't want to waste any more time. I'm happy to pass over to Artilla Devi, and Artilla is going to tell us about, Artilla is going to be talking to us about her work at Catalpa International in Fiji. So over to you, Artilla. Thank you. I think you'll have to unmute your mic. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. I already started speaking. So hello again, everyone. Today I will talk about Catalpa International and our work, our current e-learning program in the Pacific, and share with you what we believe are key elements for successful e-learning to happen in the Pacific. So to begin with, I'll start with Catalpa, the company, as the NGO, sorry. So Catalpa International is an international development NGO with a focus on creating change by combining human-centered design and technology. So we design with people to create programs that support them. In education, we have worked in areas of teacher professional development, education policymaking, and creating communities of practice. Currently, we are running programs in 9 countries in the Asia-Pacific region. So the program that's been run in the Pacific is the Pacific e-learning program for science. It's an MFET-funded project to raise the achievement of Pacific students in science in Year 10 in the Cook Islands, Samoa, Solomons, and Vanuatu. We are working closely with the respective ministries of education in these countries and partnering with Wintec and Nanogirl in New Zealand to develop contextualized curriculum for students, teacher professional development material, and micro-learning courses. This program was rolled out in August this year during the coronavirus pandemic. So we had to conduct all our inception phase research design activities remotely and largely online. Some key differences in our approach as compared to past EdTech projects, because we went back and tried to look at what had been done before and to try and see what we could do. So what we are doing is we have a focus on teacher professional development and going forward with the idea that devices do not replace the teacher, that they actually complement them. And for teachers to use the device that they already have or know how to use. And most of our teachers have a smartphone, and that's the device that they are more comfortable using. And one of the other things we do is that we are working with a one device to many approach rather than one device per student. So when it comes to e-learning in the islands, it's always good to know where we are starting from. And what we know about e-learning or ICT for better education in the Pacific is that the use of smartphones is increasing in the Pacific. ICT infrastructure is improving. Ministry of Education are including the use of ICTs in their strategic plans, frameworks, and master plans. ICT and e-learning projects have been running in the Pacific. And when the coronavirus hit, Pacific countries were able to move to e-learning using whatever capacity they had. So if these are the things that we know, then what are the key elements we need to keep in mind for successful e-learning in the Pacific? And we came up with generally 3 elements that we believe we all need to keep in mind. And these are the context, the scalability of the project, and the sustainability of the project. So to begin with context, it is very important to understand the context. Like Gail said, to understand the larger picture, everyone who's involved. So not only the workings of the ministry at a technical or organizational level, or schools and ICT facilities at a physical level, but also the community. Pacific Islanders are communal people, and programs need to understand that the child or the student or the teacher is not treated in isolation, but are part of the larger community, including elders, chiefs, families, provincial councils, church leaders, and these are some of the things we should keep in mind. And the second thing to do is to have empathy, not to treat teachers as our guinea pigs or as our subject matter or participants, but to understand that they also have families, they also have commitments, they're also human, and they have a life outside the classroom and outside our program and project. And the fact that ministries are often short-staffed, or they have other projects running round about the same time that our programs might be running. So those are the things to keep in mind, or some of the things rather to keep in mind about context. For scalability, scalability is something that needs to be focused on in order to drive a successful program. And this can be done by having an honest conversation about how the ministry will be able to build on the project. So most project or programs last 2, 3, or 5 years. Will the ministry be able to expand the project to say other locations, other teachers, other communities? Or does the work end when the project ends? Which is ideally not something that we would want. The other thing to do would be to consider working with the government to design plans, policies, framework, and the budget to scale the project. We could also build on other projects done by the government or other organizations. There is no need to reinvent the wheel all the time or to start from scratch all the time. Some work might have already been done in the area. So, we could just go back, do a bit of research, and try and build our programs from that point. And one of the other things about scalability is, again, what Gail mentioned, providing accessibility by using open source applications and software where possible, as that will reduce the overall cost for the governments and long term. And yeah, thinking about making it accessible in terms of gender, inclusivity, and providing equity. And the last element is sustainability. So thinking about long-term planning in terms of both physical equipment and human resources. So with physical equipment, again, if things break down, will they be able to repair it? Who is accountable for the damages? What are the costs involved? And if you supply hardware, will they be used in the classroom, or will they sit in a locked cupboard somewhere? What happens if it's broken? So all of those things, the larger questions. And it's also important to have more than one person involved as a focal point. We have realized that sometimes we could depend on one person, and if that person leaves, then you'd be in a bit of a tight spot. Also, one of the other things where sustainability is concerned is to learn from other projects and make our own findings available so that other upcoming or current projects can learn. So it's like developing communities of practice. So not only sharing what works in our respective programs and projects, but also what doesn't. So, creating and encouraging but a critical group of friends. And the last thing I'd mention about sustainability is developing regional partnerships. We have a number of crop agencies in the Pacific, so working closely with them. For example, USP, SPC, and seeing how we can all again connect and learn from each other. So overall, I would say there's always room for improvement in all learning and teaching practices. And it's the same for e-learning in the Pacific. We can make it work if we contextualize it, understand how to scale it, and focus on sustainability. So that's all that I have to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Artilla. That was very interesting in terms of understanding how e-education can be put into a broader social context. So I'm sure there's some further questions that people will have. I've got a few, but which I'll put later on if I get the opportunity. Thank you very much. That was very interesting. Okay, so next speaker is the Honourable Siaosu Sovaleni, who's the Minister of Education. Welcome, Siaosu. Let's see, where are you? There you are. How are you going? So it's good to see you again. The floor is yours, so welcome.
Hey, Will, good to see you again, and good to actually participate in this forum. Not quite sure what you want me to talk about, but I'll talk a little bit about e-learning here in Tonga. Just like most of us, I mean, I guess we're forced to actually change direction in how we approach e-learning. E-learning was like a pastime, something that, yes, we can do, but we'll do it later. And then COVID-19 happened, and we actually have to do something about it. For us, e-learning is about using technology to actually facilitate learning from home. So that's what happened in Tonga here. We actually look at what would be the appropriate technology, found out that we need to actually have a blended approach. We look at, delivering some content via radio, because that's still the prevailing technology used in the islands. Radio is still pretty much the technology of choice, I guess, right now. We got IC, we got internet access and so forth, but not to the level that we're comfortable that everybody will have access to the learning material that we're sending out. So we got radio, we got TV, we also got internet, and of course we still got paper. So our approach was more of a blended approach, because all we want is to make sure that our students actually have access to look to the appropriate content. One of the key after the COVID-19 lockdown that we had back in March, we decided to actually have a trial day. So on those trial days, we actually closed down all the schools and forced the kids to actually learn from home using this blended approach mode that we had. So after that, we did a survey, find out what's working, what's not working, and actually did also a survey on not just the kids but also the parents. What would they find useful? How else can we approach learning from home and so forth? So it was quite an eye-opening experience, not just for us, but also for the parents. Most common comments is the fact that now we appreciate the work that the teacher are actually doing, because they found out in the course of a day how much work involved in actually trying to facilitate the learning of if they're little boy or little girl, and make it worse if it's a couple of boys and couple of girls. So they appreciate the amount of work that our teacher actually have to put in teaching the kids. The other one was basically choosing the right technology. the kids, I mean, the the primary school age kids tend to prefer radio, whereas the youth tend to go with TV or internet based. We use a CMS to actually push some of the content, but again, we're talking about probably just over 50% of our students actually having access to the internet, and viewing a video and so forth tend to be a little bit data constrained. A lot of data you need to have a lot of data to actually run some of those videos. So it was quite a learning experience. So we took that into account, and then work around a few of those issues. And then after a month or so, we ran another trial day too. So those trial day, no schools, the whole of the kingdom, thereby forcing kids to actually learn from home, parents staying home, working with their kids. So it was quite an experience just to go through it. And as I mentioned earlier on, the parents, if we're going to do e-learning, especially in the environment of COVID-19, parents play a very important role because they'll be at home, they'll be the one substituting as teachers, helping the kids to learn whatever they can. Of course, there's no substitute for face-to-face with teachers. E-learning, it's just a means to actually accommodate or address the challenges that we face with COVID-19 and the possible school close down. But after trying to address that, it also addressed some of the issues that we had. Delivering education to remote areas, delivering education to outer islands, because it involved the same kind of thinking, same kind of rationale, the same kind of technology. So it benefited from our efforts to address the COVID-19 potential closure. So that to me is a bonus due to the work that we're putting in to address potential closure of schools due to COVID-19. And I guess, Will, the other important discussion we had is now talking to the providers about possible data packages for students. I do believe that we need to have that conversation to actually see, a much better packages for the students, for the kids, so they can actually, try out some of the more fancy applications that we have using the internet and so forth, rather than relying on radio and TV. But it has been a good learning experience for us, and the most important, I guess, factor for us is actually delivering the education to our clients, which is the students. And what's the best way? And we found a blended approach tend to work much better. Radio, TV, internet, and also paper-based. We still need to send paper-based, like paper instructions to the parents to follow. This is where the website is. This is where you can actually access some of the videos. At the same time, the timetable for the video, for the TV programs and the radio programs. So that's why I believe people tend to think it's just about the internet. It's not. It's about the appropriate technology and how it can be best used to deliver education to homes. Thank you, Will.
Thank you very much, Yossi. That was really interesting. In fact, we were just talking, Andrew and I were just talking before everyone's kind of logging on about how radio seems to be overlooked, but not so in Tonga. You guys are right onto it straight away in terms of its value. It still has a lot of value in terms of delivering education.
Right. I mean, I'm not quite sure whether any islands in the Pacific Islands actually have internet in all the islands, and whether they have affordable access, and whether they have the appropriate devices and so forth. So, I don't believe we can ignore radio as a technology to deliver education to homes.
Yes. Okay. I've got some fond memories when I used to work at Radio 2AP in Samoa of the education people coming in at 8:30 and delivering all the lessons. I learned a lot from those lessons. Okay, well, thank you very much, Siaosu. We'll no doubt get to hear a bit more about your experiences. All right, Alipati, Taupo from Tuvalu, thank you very much. It's great to see you here. You've just come from one meeting to here, so we're really thankful that you can make the time available. So the floor is yours, Alipati.
Thanks, William. I'm not able to share my screen, but that's fine. I'll just walk through the presentation. So again, my name is Alipati Taupo. I'm the Senior Education Officer for ICT here in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports of Tuvalu. And I think I just want to, before looking at some of the recommendations or some of the lessons I have learned, I would like to briefly go over the work I've been doing so far, and that is on the Tuvalu e-learning school system. So with the e-learning school system that we have introduced in our schools, we have approached it with the assumption that internet will not be available. So right off the gate, we said internet is not going to be available because that was the reality. We started this project in 2015. I wouldn't say it's a project because it's a very long-term. It's something that the ministry has committed to from the bottom to the top. So we have been very blessed to get that support. So it was initiated in 2015. We got a lot of support from USB as far as technical assistance, designing or looking at some of the fail-safes that we would need to have in place to ensure that it runs smoothly. But now at this stage, it currently provides all primary schools with some form of intranet-based digital library of open education resources. So these open education resources, they're accessible through multiple ways, mainly two. One would be through World Possible's Rachel Plus device that I'm sure a lot of us are probably familiar with. So this would be a local intranet. It'll provide a local intranet with the OERs available, and then the students and teachers can access them through computer labs that we've set up across the nation. And also, failing that, they can use their own Wi-Fi enabled devices to connect through. Alternatively, for those schools that have power issues, we have rolled out the Kio kits that I think a couple of countries in the region have also purchased and used and rolled out. It's just a collection of 40 tablets preloaded with open education resources. So those are the main hardware that we're using to access those open education resources. Now, in deploying these solutions that we have come up with, the main challenges that we have faced in our experience from 2015 up until now, especially in the beginning phases, was the having to go through cutting through the red tape. That it's something that we sometimes forget about. There's a lot of processes that you would need to go through to get the funding, secure the funding, and then reporting back how you've spent the funding. So that always has to be considered in anything we do. And also the other challenge that we faced and we hit straight on was instilling a culture of ownership from schools and the community. So since this is not something that we're saying, oh, this is the ministry's system, we're calling it a school system, so it belongs to the school. So a lot of design, a lot of planning went into instilling this culture of ownership, where we don't do everything for the school so that they feel like they've pitched in to building this new e-learning system. So what they've been asked to pitch in was just furnishing the room, or first of all giving us a room, and a lot of schools allocated half of their library and did the renovation so that we could use that room for e-learning, and then the other half would still remain the library. Getting the furnishings in place, and that kind of instilled that culture of ownership that this belongs to them, and it's not something that if it's broken, oh, it's their fault. It's the ministry's fault. So we feel that we hit that challenge right at the head of the nail. and also the understanding of outer island context. So the individual priorities of our remote islands, of our remote communities. Luckily for Tuvalu, we only have 8 other outer islands aside from the main island, but I could only imagine how difficult it would be for Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga with the many remote islands that they would have to, engage with. But it's also important to understand that each island has their own priorities, and e-learning is not always at the top of the list. So it took a couple of, going back and forth, and also it took a couple of administrations of, island councils to get things over the board. So it's very important to remember the outer island or the remote islands context. Some of the opportunities that we were very lucky and very blessed to have is, this, as I mentioned before, there was support from the top to the bottom, so of the whole ministry. So from bureaucratic and political leaders, we cut through the red tape, we put in the cabinet papers, and there was support from cabinet and all the way down to our staff in the ministry. And because of that, we also were able to engage with a lot of donor support to get this happening. So since cabinet was on board, finance was also on board in finding the donor support for all these fundings year in and year out. And the active participation from development partners like USB, and I think Ian used to be in TERIC. That was a huge development partner in working through this. Now, as you may have noticed, that I want to shift our focus away from COVID-19. I don't believe COVID-19 is the only reason why we should adopt e-learning. This is something that we have prioritized from the start. And as you may notice, it's taken us quite a long time just to get the hardware down. So I think the key elements for having a successful e-learning is it boils down to 4 areas. One is the ICT deployment and maintenance. How do you deal with that? How are you planning around the hardware and the software that you're deploying? How do you choose one from the other? How do you maintain them? Especially with our context, we have a dispersed islands. The second one is content. How do you select the right content? The third would be the alignment of those content with the local context, which is kind of going together with that content. And then the last one is, I think Gail has mentioned, monitoring and evaluation, and also learning, I think has been tagged to monitoring and evaluation nowadays. So it's MEL nowadays. So going back to the ICT deployment, this is a very foundational requirement. You cannot build your e-learning system without having an ICT deployment and maintenance plan. So it's very important to plan carefully for failure. We have to expect a lot of failures will happen, and you won't be available on the premise to address those issues right away. So there has to be some plans for remote support whenever possible, and where impossible, the next best option would to have some local support. I think Gail mentioned that in our distance learning that arose from COVID-19, we had some coordinators in the outer islands to help our not so ICT literate staff, in getting things up and running. And if there's one thing I've learned as far as deployment and maintenance, redundancy is key. So for every piece of hardware we have out there, we would have a second one. We have boats going out to the outer islands once a month at best. So it could take longer than a month. And we would expect, to have that 1 month turnaround whenever there's an issue. For content, it's very important to first of all, understand whether online or intranet is the best option for you. For us, it was an easy option because internet was not available. So we went ahead with whatever can be provided locally. Sourcing and selection of the content, what would be appropriate for what you would like to deliver. And I think this comes back to what Gail said, it's important to understand, why are we doing e-learning? It's not just something that we must tick off and say, okay, we're doing e-learning, but there must be some kind of purpose. The interactive versus static. So this mostly depends on the ability of your devices and budgeting. So obviously interactive content may cost a bit more to deliver. The user experiences, whether you're providing a desktop or a tablet, so the mouse and keyboard versus touchscreen, that that makes a huge difference in the applications that you'll be selecting. And also the alignment of the content with the local context. So that is something we're currently working on. So I feel very confident that we've delivered the hardware out there. The hardware is working, the maintenance is fine. The next step that we're working on is aligning those content to the local context. What does that mean? So we should be asking ourselves, should we be adapting the content? Should we be modifying the content so it aligns with our context, our curriculum? Or should we be just mapping the content so that for this particular learning outcome in our curriculum, this would be the appropriate resource that we can use to support that? And also, is translation necessary? Sometimes it's absolutely not necessary and could be something that you really don't need to explore. But it's some of the questions that we need to ask ourselves. And lastly, for the monitoring and evaluation and also learning, I think one key message that we need to remember is that e-learning is a marathon. It's not something you achieve within 3 months or 1 year or 3 years. And that's a lesson I've learned the hard way. So I walked into this project thinking it will just take me a couple of months. I procured all my equipment. I was just going to go out there to the outer islands, install it, do the training, and then it's done. But no, that is not the reality. We should always expect a lot of hurdles and failures along the way. And that doesn't mean that it's time to give up. That means that it's time to learn from those lessons and see what we can do to change that. So we coming back to what Gail said, we need to lock on to an end target. What exactly are we trying to achieve? It could be improved literacy and numeracy. It could be just improved digital literacy or whatever it is. You need to find that end target, and that will keep you focused and keep you working forward despite all the failures that you will eventually face. So developing a results framework, leading the way from planning at the very beginning and procurement all the way to that end target is also key. And that's something we're trying to work on. Developing and continuously measuring those informative KPIs. I think Honorable Siaosu rightly mentioned that data is very important. And that's something that I think we're lacking, especially here in Tuvalu. And I hope that's something that we can work on. And then lastly, taking all of that data, taking all of those issues that you've been stumbling as you work along, and looking at what we can do to improve on that. So that learning part of MEL. So and that involves not just looking at, we've ticked this box, we've ticked that box, but again, like Gail has mentioned, going back to people. We need to talk to people. We need to remember that e-learning is for the people. It's for the children, the students, the teachers, the parents. What do they think about it? Is it working? Is it a foreign concept? We need to make it part, kind of like a household term that everyone talks about, that everyone understands. And unfortunately, that's not where we are right now. And it's something also that I feel is important to work towards. I think that's all I have to say. Sorry for going a bit over time, but I'll welcome any questions following this presentation. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, Alipati. I mean, that was very interesting. So, I mean, no worries about going over time. I think what you've said seems to resonate with a lot of the things that have already been said, particularly the maintenance equipment side of things. It's interesting, our first E-Talanoa about 2 months ago, we were actually looking at open source technologies, and that was the theme. But education didn't come through that strongly, so that's maybe an area where those two groups at least within PICISOC, maybe come together and work together on. I just want to point out that Siaosu has another meeting to go to, and if anyone has a question that they'd like to put to Honourable Siaosu, that's I think it's okay just for you to open up your mic. I believe you can just open up your mic.
If I may step in here, thanks very much, Siaosu. It was really appreciated what you had to say there. It seems that a lot of the work that you were doing was around the content in the various medias. Did you use external content, or did you make your own content? And if you made your own content, how did you go about doing that?
This is about content. We created our own. that was one of the challenges. Actually, how do you use these different technology to deliver pretty much, you know, the content that will have the same effect in terms of the learning of a child. So how do you actually use radio? The fact that it's a one-way medium. How do you use television? What would be the appropriate subject to use on television versus radio? And you know, what would be the best way to actually use TV to do a subject? I mean, not just basically videotaping a teacher in a classroom, but also trying to actually get some interaction, even though it's a one-way medium. So all of that, those were the little things, but it actually make a difference in actually using these different technology to deliver. Not just, it's not about the content per se, but to actually provide the same learning effect on a child. You know, because you're not going to send the same stuff on radio that you're putting up on television and on your CMS on the net. So it was on a case by case. And one of the key, I guess, key learning experience for us in terms of the delivery is the fact that we need to engage the parents a little bit more. Delivering education or learning experience to the homes is not too bad. Making the most of it, actually, you need to have the parents or engage the guardians to act as a teacher, working with their kids to actually have the optimum effect. So it was a myriad of factors that we need to bring together, and that's why, as I said earlier on, a blended approach was what we actually end up with. And at the same time, given the fact that we're pushing a lot of the kids to using the internet, we were also very mindful of potential cyber safety issues. And again, it's about raising awareness to the kids, but also to the parents and the teachers. So we actually have to run some classes too for the teachers, so they can be aware of potential dangers of using the internet because of cyber safety or cyber security issues. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Siaosu. I just, I mean, with radio too, it's possible for an announcer to actually, or the teacher to actually speak in the local language, and then also if they're teaching English, for instance, it's possible then to kind of intersperse it with, well, in my case, it was Samoan, but that's just talking about radio as being a very appropriate medium. Okay, does anyone else have any other questions for Siaosu? Because he's got to go to another meeting. Look, I'm hoping that people can just open their microphones up, or not. If not, just raise your hand, I suppose, so we can. I can't see anyone with their hand raised. So thanks a lot, Siaosu. It was great to catch up again, and certainly stay on as long as you need to. But thank you very much for your
Thank you.
input. Yeah, it's been great. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Will.
Yeah, thank you.
Keep doing whatever you do right now. I think it's good to actually share experience, learn from each other. Yeah,
definitely. Thanks for that. Thanks for the encouragement. Yes. Malo. All right. So now I'm just a little bit. I have a question which I will put to everybody, just so maybe some of the presenters have questions they'd like to ask as well. But I suppose the thing about sustainability, which Artilla mentioned, which I thought was really important, was about teachers. And I just wonder if any of the other presenters want to maybe add to that in terms of how do you incentivize teachers to become part of this e-learning wave, because I could imagine that it could be quite confronting to teachers as well to actually have to learn new methods. So I'll throw it to you, Gail, first and see what you've got to say about that.
Thanks.
You can throw it back to me if you like.
No, fine. I guess in the Cooks case, they were particularly lucky that when they decided to trial the whole online classroom, there were actually a couple of teachers that were very passionate and wanted to be involved. As I said earlier, initially that was running out of the ministry, but then I think once it moved to being based at a school and other teachers saw what was going on and would walk past what looked like an empty room but sounded like a full classroom because there was all this noise on the teacher's laptop, that they could start to see how interesting it could be. And, you know, I think one of the best things I saw was when we had kids on 2 remote islands sharing a poetry lesson together. And the teacher wasn't even really, you know, kids were reading the poems they had written to kids in a class on a completely different island. And actually one of our schools on the main island ended up, you know how we used to have pen pals? Well, they had like the equivalent in the 21st century with a school in New Zealand. And that was a primary school. And the 2 teachers actually agreed to run, they did the same thing for a 6-week teaching period. And those 2 classes would get together once a week. So you do need teachers that are passionate and want to do it. But I can say when other teachers just kind of see it going on, you know, they might not want to look like they're interested, but given an opportunity, I don't think there's any, I mean, teachers are by nature learners, so I don't think given an opportunity that is safe.
Yes,
you know,
I think that's
so you're not being set up, you know, you can't be told you're wrong. So I think as long as there are safe opportunities, teachers are always going to take them.
Okay. Alipati, do you have anything to share on that score, on that topic?
Thanks, William. I think I think my contribution to this is just seeing this as more of a value proposition. So we need to understand the perspective of teachers. What is the value that we're presenting? So depending on how we package e-learning, it may or may not be valuable to teachers. So I think that should also be part of the planning and design. What is the value to teachers and also, you know, students? But since we're talking about teachers, how does this make their job easier? Because if they are now expected to learn new technology and, you know, putting in more effort and maybe not getting a guarantee of whether it's going to benefit them or not, then, you know, why commit? So we need to be in the introduction of the system. It needs to be very clear. It needs to be made very clear to the teachers what they can get out of this. And I think Gail points out a very good point, you know, of doing kind of like a case study. So if someone is able to do it and that becomes the champion, that would become the case study that will be glorified for all the other schools. And then they would see how it can work for them too. You know, if he or she can do it, then I can do it too. So that kind of approach will really, you know, strengthen the whole value proposition. So I think that's the main thing that we should be thinking about when we're trying to get that teachers' engagement. We need to really understand what value are we proposing the learning system.
Okay, Artilla, do you have anything more to say about that on that topic? Seeing that you the first one who raised it, you can.
I'll just pick up from where Alipati left off about showing teachers the value. So we've been, as part of this work that we're doing for the Pacific e-learning program, we've been talking to teachers one-to-one. And one of the things we're trying to do is get an understanding of their daily life. And one of the teachers mentioned something interesting about using a projector. So he said that before, a couple of years ago, the school did not have a projector and he had to draw everything on the board, you know, and now he has a projector and he's very proud of it and he's very happy with it. And so I asked him, I mean, it's simply that I'm used to using projectors. So, you know, I couldn't really understand why he was so happy about it. So I asked him, I said, why is the projector important to you? Like, what does it make you do? And he mentioned two things. He said, one, it saves him time. So instead of coming in the classroom and spending his time writing everything on the board, or drawing the diagram on the board using different chalk or on the whiteboard, he can just get a photo, put it on his laptop and project it. So it saves him time. And the other thing it does is he's able to show his students things in new ways. So instead of simply seeing like one diagram on the board, they're able to see a video about it. They are able to see a nice interactive diagram if he happens to find one, and he finds that students engage more. So now when he asks, he does this in a lab, so the projector is in a lab, and he said that before, when he wanted to take his students to the lab, they would just be like, fine, move from one classroom to another classroom. But now they want to go to the lab because they know that they will get to see something interesting, something different. So if we can, show value like that look, it's not only about giving your students different option, it's also about you saving time for yourself and, doing something different, making it and keeping it exciting for yourself. And modeling to other teachers. So all of those things. So there's possibility.
Okay. Thank you very much, Artilla. Those great examples. Andrew's got his hand up and he wants to ask a question or say something. So Andrew?
Yeah, I thought I'd just kind of echo Artilla and Alipati's comments earlier around the obviously focusing on the interest and the skills of your teaching cohort to actually utilize this technology. And something which we've found in a context very similar to Alipati's in Tuvalu is working with our teachers, that there's obviously a mixture of ages and demographics in our teaching cohort. And so some of the younger teachers who are coming out of teachers college are a bit more comfortable using the digital projector or using the mobile phone, but may not have the strongest curriculum knowledge. Whereas the more mature teachers are fantastic with the curriculum. They understand the ins and outs, but they're not so confident with the technology. And so what we've worked to do in the Kiribati context is try to bring those two together so that when a teacher is being deployed into a new school, they partner with the more mature teacher to get handle on classroom management, all those basic skills of being a teacher. And they bring to the classroom that technology, digital literacy skill. And so there's a bit of a support network between the younger and the older teachers. The other technique, which I thought was really important, is obviously making sure this is embedded into your teachers college. So during pre-service training at the Kiribati Teachers College, they're using Moodle, their learning management system, as part of their pre-service training, the same at USP. And so there is a bit more confidence that when they're deployed into the school that they've already been exposed to those. And it actually opens up the opportunity for in-service training so that once they've been deployed, they're comfortable using the learning management system. And then once they're on the islands and they are remotely based, they already have that digital literacy, those skills to be able to engage effectively with those tools. So those are my kind of two takeaways, is that, supporting your teachers, looking at how you can mentor different teachers of different levels in the school, and also how do you tap into the institution in each country, your teachers college, to be able to help support that digital literacy, ability to use technology to deliver the curriculum. But yeah, and fantastic. All the speakers today have been great. So I really wanted to commend everyone for their inputs today. Very, very happy.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. That's great. All right, so we've got a question from Cherry about the stats around how successful e-learning is in comparison to a classroom-based approach. And then Jim says that he's got some data on how successful e-learning has been. So who wants, Jim, do you want to actually answer that question, or do you, it sounds like you've got some, Jim Tora, are you able, I'll unmute you, there you go. Here we go. Oh, sorry, I've just unmuted you. Oh, something's going wrong. I can't unmute you for some reason.
I'm not able to speak right now because I'm at a function at the moment.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. All right, so I'll throw it to the lucky Jim. So would one of the presenters like to respond to that particular question? Has there any stats been kind of developed which suggests that e-learning in comparison to classroom-based approach is better or worse? Or just either anyone can talk on that topic. It's simple yes or no.
Okay, well, I think I'll start off while everyone else is spending a bit of time to think. Not necessarily a response, but I think another thing that should be considered is the implementation of e-learning that we are comparing to traditional classroom-based learning. We need to understand that classroom-based learning is a well-oiled machine that we've been working on for years and years. And e-learning is that, new player, that's the new kid in town, that, is still learning how things work. So we need to always walk into a comparison between the two with that kind of mindset. It's not an apples to apples. It will never be an apples to apples comparison. So there needs to be some extra consideration there. Having said that, I think with internal exams, we found that our distance learning students haven't been doing so well compared to our classroom-based learning students, which is unfortunate. But what that tells us is we need to work on our distance learning. So as Gail would understand, and I would just shed a bit of light in our situation, what has happened is I think we're one of the lucky ones that, we're still carrying out business mostly as usual, but there's still a bit of uncertainty in sending kids back to their schools. Gail mentioned that we only have 1 or 2 secondary schools. One is a boarding school, and we still have parents who are uncertain about sending their kids back, and not being in contact with them daily. So we were, I guess, put on the spot as the ministry to figure out a way how to address this issue. Were we ready? Definitely not, but we did anyway. And we put in a lot of effort in the planning. We've realized that we do not have enough capacity in the outer islands to immediately train the students and teachers to be able to utilize the distance learning effectively. So we've implemented a plan where these students would now report to their primary schools, which are available in all islands. And we placed a coordinator in there to be kind of the liaison officer that would send things back and forth. So I think if we have a very solid e-learning system, that we have already had a plan for every aspect of the classroom-based learning. We have something in that e-learning to address that. That the feedback. How does the instant feedback happen? How does that how do we mimic that face-to-face experience that happens in the classroom? We would never replace it, but the best we can do is to mimic it. And I think what we would generally find is that we would get the results that we got in Tuvalu. E-learning will not stack up to classroom-based learning. It'll be very difficult for it. If it does, then we need to document whatever process you're using, because you found gold, basically. You found that the sorcerer's stone, or whatever you want to call it, because that is what all of us here in this room, in this virtual room, that is what we're seeking, the closest, the next best thing to classroom-based learning that we can deliver through e-learning. But just boiling down my response, I think in general we would probably find that e-learning would not be as effective as classroom-based learning, and that has always been our message to parents. While we provide distance learning modality, that is not the recommended modality at this stage, because we recognize we still need a lot of work to be put into that aspect. But once we do get e-learning to a really good state, then we could probably do some comparative analysis. Over to you, Gail.
Oh, Patti, thank you. I mean, it was some time ago, and I'm just, because I actually didn't think to ask the ministry this week the answer to that question. But I certainly remember in my time in being involved that the students, because it was particularly around subject areas where there wasn't a specialist in their home island. So when they did move to the main island for that senior secondary, they were a bit behind the students who had been having face-to-face the whole time, but certainly not as far behind as they had been when they hadn't had anything and somebody who knew nothing about chemistry had been teaching them chemistry for a couple of years. And they also caught up a lot quicker.
Okay, Artilla, do you have anything?
Yeah, I would believe that, again, just echoing Alipati and Gail's points, that especially in the Pacific, I mean, we need to, when it comes to e-learning, we need to sort of understand that we also started it a bit late and that we did not have these facilities in place. We got to do these things later. And the other thing is that teaching online, the pedagogy, online teaching pedagogy, classroom teaching pedagogy, are, different things. And again, that is something that our teachers may not have the professional development ability, at present, or, well, not at that level, perhaps, where they need to be. So these are areas that we need to, again, look into and work in. So at this stage, yeah, e-learning, like students who study through e-learning and those who study face-to-face classroom, there is bound to be a difference. And again, it also comes down to, again, the context and our cultural context. We like groups. We are by nature, as specific people, we like to learn in groups, we like to work in groups. And that is something we will, again, need to keep in mind when we are rolling out e-learning. If we just give devices and just go, everybody sit in a corner and do your e-learning at home, it's not going to work. So we need to keep that in mind and think about how, again, we can bring the community together, like the student, the teacher, the parents, and make them all part of this journey. So it's not about having, this approach where we run a program and we say, here's all the stuff. And now we want you guys to get on this e-learning course and get it done. But seeing, putting everyone together and sort of moving towards the same goal, that light on the mountain and getting there all together.
Could I just make a quick observation about that? And it speaks from the presentations that have been made today. There are many different reasons for introducing e-learning, some of which we don't even understand when we introduce it. And so saying that the only way to measure effectiveness of e-learning is by exam results is a little bit narrow in its thinking. We may be trying to do things that are not measurable in the exam system. For example, learning how to learn. You can't do an exam about learning how to learn. I just think that it's a little bit simplistic to say that it's based on exam results of those who did e-learning and those who didn't. I don't think that's the entire answer in terms of how effective e-learning is. That. Having said that, there is very little research that I know about in the whole region that has done some good quality research on effectiveness of e-learning. At best, we have many anecdotal stories of things happening that wouldn't have happened without it. And I think that gives us hope to continue, but we haven't seen that. And even in places, developed countries like Australia, New Zealand and Europe and things like that, there are mixed studies. Some say it's better and some say it's worse. So again, it gets back to, I think, what you're trying to do. No, and anyway, sorry, just my 2 cents worth.
Could I just make a quick comment on that, please, Will? Because
yeah, sure.
I totally agree with you, and I think things like, you know, students having that skill of managing their own learning and leading their own learning is something that's awesome. But that also just takes me back to that where I said, is our system ready? Because actually all our systems worked out what to measure so far is exam results.
Yes.
Or how many kids met the national standard, you know. So is our system ready for what this could do if we really let it go?
Yeah. I'm just aware of the fact that Domingo in Timor-Leste has put a question up in relation to teacher training, and another, Lucy, I think also, Lucy Moala. Sorry, I've just been hyphenated. I can't see the full name. Apologies, Lucy, but about teacher training. But Domingo, do you want to just unmute your microphone and put your question to the group?
Yes. My question to the group or presentation, because I want now for all of your experience to implement learning during the COVID-19 pandemic. Because like in the Timor-Leste, I was working in the National for the Health Training Center. So for my observation in the Timor-Leste, sometimes we are not yet to implement or to create a good system in the health training. So I want to hearing from the presenters how their observation for the progress to implement learning in terms of in-service training to providing training to the health workers. I think this is a good point for our institution here. So I want to hearing from the madam and brother was already present this good material like that.
Well, yeah, thanks. So in-service training for health workers, is that right? Is that the specific question about, so it's a slightly different, rather than school students, we're talking about health workers.
If I could make a comment about that.
For health workers.
Yeah. Okay.
Training for health workers. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
If I could make a comment about that, I've been working with WHO and SPC on digital health issues, and one of the key elements there is about professional development using technologies. Still very early days for us at the moment, and if I was to make a bold statement, the health section seems to be several years behind the education section in terms of becoming digitalised. Maybe we could take a discussion offline here, because it's probably not of interest to all the people in the discussion, but I'll be happy to discuss what we're talking about and the things that we're learning.
Okay, thanks, Ian. I'm just aware of the fact that we are probably moving on towards the end. Andrew, you're wanting to say something at one point about the teacher training or keeping teachers engaged in?
Yeah, like I've actually almost forgotten what I was going to say, but I think more importantly, I think there's been a couple of comments just moments ago around the current evidence which is available to support investments into e-learning. And look, there's actually a couple of really rigorous pieces of research done quite recently. So in East Timor, there's some work which has been done to support teachers deliver the curriculum, which has got some quite rigorous data collection, looking at being able to teach the curriculum with fidelity and to be able to actually keep the teachers on pace in delivering the curriculum, which has been quite positive. So I'd really encourage you guys to have a look at that. The other piece of research I thought was quite important is something funded a couple of years ago in Kiribati, and it kind of reflects the context which Alipati is in, looking at not necessarily distance education, but looking at supporting teachers in a classroom environment with technology. And that project looked at supporting grade 4 teachers to be able to deliver the curriculum using some tablets and a projector, and essentially making sure that it has a statistically significant impact on their literacy and numeracy. Like for us in Kiribati, this is a big challenge. In grade 4, you speak a Kiribati to grade 3, and then grade 4, you start speaking English. And so they looked at this challenge the ministry proposed and said, look, we're really struggling with the English language project initiative. And so we looked at how we could support teachers through that transition. And again, the use of technology in those classrooms, and it was only 5 classrooms, but the number of students showed that there was a statistically significant impact on improved literacy and numeracy, which was measured through the collection of our EGRA and EGMA assessment. So again, I'd encourage you guys to have a look at that research which was done. The last thing I want to say is that at the end of the day, a lot of the ministries which we work with are a little bit cash strapped, and we have to make really tough decisions about what we spend money on. And so when I approach somebody about supporting the e-learning program, I need to have some pretty robust evidence to support my case that putting in this initiative is going to be a better use of your limited recurrent funds than chairs, tables, textbooks, more teachers. So I think it is really critical that we do think about the cost of these initiatives and that they are having an impact. Because in some of these schools, yeah, buying more textbooks is probably really important. And in some of these schools, effective access to water supply is also really important. So all these things can have an impact on having a positive learning environment for students. And I think if we want to put our case that e-learning should be something you prioritize, then we need to have some pretty robust evidence to support that that argument when you go and try and argue the minister or argue the Ministry of Finance. But following this, I'll send you guys through a few links to the bits of research you can use to cite when you want to have this discussion with your minister or your the leadership team within the ministry to try and rally to get those resources you need to move these things forward. Back to you, Will.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. That's great. I realise we've probably come to the end of our time, and Gail, I mean, we don't realise that well, I've been reminded that we're certainly on different time zones, and it's very late where Gail is in the Cook Islands, and she probably wants to go to bed. So thank you very much, Gail, for making yourself available, and it's been really, I think we've all learned a great deal. Thank you very much for contributing to the discussion. It's been really interesting. Now, I realise that Clee has a question about age groups, which I think maybe we could talk to Clee or just kind of put some responses on the chat, because I realise we're coming to the end of our time, and the last part of the evening's really been devoted for Ian to recap on the main things that we've learned. So he's been busy taking notes. Great, thank you. So Ian, I'll hand it over to you, and you can just finish the evening off with some of your summaries that you've written.
Yeah, thanks, Will. First of all, really appreciate everybody taking the time to do this and taking up some time from your family, especially for the presenters. I think there's some very valuable lessons learnt there, and there's some key issues that we all need to think a little bit about. If I was to sort of summarise what my biggest impression that I got about all of this was that e-learning's a bit of a journey, and we probably don't know all that we have to do when we start. So I think it's key to think of it as a learning journey, that we are learning as we go along, and we shouldn't expect too many results too quickly. And I think I take the point that Alipati made that we have to be prepared to fail as well. That's an important part of learning is failing and then moving on. And to that extent, I think these types of sessions are very valuable in sharing what has happened and the lessons that we've learnt. So I think from that point of view, I think we should consider ways of continuing this sort of sharing of information, sharing of things. I asked Siaosu a question about the content that they're using in Tonga, because that's a big issue in many ministries of education. The curriculum development unit has to develop the content. And I'm really impressed that they've been able to, in a relatively short period of time, generate quite a lot of content. And I think there's some very interesting lessons to learn there for other ministries of education and curriculum development units to talk about how we can make this digital content. How can we make it? How can we share it? How can we adapt it? I think there's some very interesting stuff to learn there from what Tonga has done. I think there's a warning that came out about unrealistic expectations. We are probably guilty of expecting to do too much in a quick period of time. And I know that's probably at the root of the question that we asked at the beginning of the session, which is, why isn't e-learning working like we wanted it to? And maybe we just do expect too much now, and maybe we just need to keep learning and keep developing and keep moving forward like that. I think the other big take I think that I got from this is that there's an interesting opportunity here to engage more people in the education, the learning process. So lots of talk about engaging parents, engaging family, engaging the local community. These are things I think that should happen with education anyway, but the technology gives us a tool to be able to use this more effectively and to do this more effectively. So I think that's an interesting side product of e-learning, if you like, that it helps us to engage with other people that have an interest in what's happening about education. I think that's about enough for me to say about my general impressions. I'll try and distill them into something more precise and more exact about the outcomes of the meeting. But for now, that's the sorts of impressions that I was left at a higher level anyway.
Okay, well, thank you, Ian. That's great. Does anybody else want to just say something before we complete the evening? Okay, forever hold your peace. Tim, as representative of the PISOC board, do you want to say a few words? Or?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Yeah, I think it was a very good session. I understand a lot of the challenges that that the speakers were talking about, and a lot of the work that has been done around e-learning. I remember working on a project for the Fiji government a couple of years ago, where we set up e-community learning centers. This was back 10, 15 years ago. We set up close to 22 sites around the country just to get e-learning into schools, and and trying to get one of the benefits that we found, or the value adds that we found from this, was teachers started doing online courses with USB and universities and upskilling themselves, and passing that knowledge onto students, and having the community come in and running sort of weekly classes for the community on basic things, how to use the internet, chatting with their relatives in the British Army and things like that. So it was a good introduction to technology and the experience of online learning, online services, I guess. But yeah, I found the session really useful, and I think with all the challenges we have, as mentioned by the hosts and those that are online. I guess we learn as we go, and whatever learnings are to be had should be shared, so that everyone can benefit. Thanks, Will.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Tim. That was well said. I really don't have much more to add. We've had the meeting recorded, both video and audio, and also in text format. So hopefully if people that have missed the meeting will be able to catch up. Okay, what about the presenters? Are we happy to... is there any last words that you'd like to impart before we say goodbye? Artilla? Alipati? Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity. And I think that forums like this are very important because it helps us, share our experiences and also develop at least a start of communities of practice where we share what we have done, what we are doing, what we plan to do, and we can all learn from each other. I mean, end of the day, we're all working towards the same thing. So it's great to have talks like this where we can all share. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I've found your discussion very interesting about what you've been doing in various countries. Certainly the communities of practice is an area that I'm interested in. And equipment maintenance, that was my first career. So Alipati, yes, I'm interested to hear what you've got to say in conclusion.
Thanks for the opportunity, William. I think on behalf of the presenters, I just want to thank William, Ian, and also the PICISOC team for arranging this E-Talanoa. It's a very great opportunity to share our learnings, what has worked and what hasn't worked. That's very important for us to share because we have a lot of similar context. I think some closing points I would like to raise is it's very important for us to remember that e-learning, again, is not a replacement for classroom-based learning. It's meant to complement it. So we should always look at it as a complement or a supplement, not a supplement, but a complement to classroom-based learning. We should always keep that in mind. And also to remember that getting the devices out there, getting the hardware and software out there is not the end. It may be the end of the pilot project, but it is the beginning for the e-learning system. It's what you do with that hardware that counts. And that's what you should be monitoring and evaluating and learning from as you move along. So for any of us who are starting an e-learning project, I think it's key to remember that when we're proposing for funding, getting this, we're not going to expect results immediately after delivering the devices. And that's something that we should all remember. And that's something that I've learned when I started this off. So I think it's probably something that I wanted to share with anyone who's about to start a project on e-learning. Yeah, that's all, William. Thanks for the opportunity. Hope to have more discussions like this.
Yes, definitely. And Andrew, so you'll have the last word, Andrew.
Yeah, sure. So I just wanted to thank all of our presenters for their time preparing their materials and speaking to us today. And I look forward to another E-Talanoa soon. We'll be sending the results of this through to the PICISOC mailing list. We'll try and synthesize some of the findings from each of the countries which have chosen to share. And we'll also try and share some of the resources which we've mentioned during our meeting today. So thank you again. Thank you, Tomas. Benakpakalevu. Cheers. And yeah, thanks, guys. We hope to see you guys again soon.
Well, thank you, Garaba, Vinaka, Fafta, and Marlo. So we'll all see you sometime, hopefully again, and maybe face to face. But thank you very much for everyone. It's been really interesting, and hopefully we could be able to share everything around. Thank you, Peter, for your participation. And do you want to say anything, Peter? I noticed you're kind of motioning. You have to switch your microphone on, actually. If you
No, that was a very weak wave to say good evening. But while I've got the floor, I'll just mention that ADB is working does have a project out at the moment on an e-learning repository and a learning management platform for open distance and flexible learning. It is very early days. In fact, we have a meeting with the Fijian government, I think next week, or so I don't want to say too much just yet, but watch
oh,
this.
come on. We're all friends here.
It's probably, it could even be on the public website.
Oh, okay.
No, but and I know there's also people in this group that are, I think, in part of the Pacific Education Cluster Group, which is basically listing all of the development agencies in the Pacific. And again, it's a little group where people are sharing with one another about what projects they're doing. So we learn from each other, and again, we don't trip over each other, as has happened. I'm sure all of us that have been in the development agency region before, where we've met colleagues because they've just left the place we have and have implemented very similar projects. And we really can't afford to waste time, energy and effort in this day and age. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm just wondering whether these kind of forums will actually provide some way of maybe overcoming some of those issues where people's knowledge is being shared. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. It's been great, and we'll have to draw it to a close. But once again, thank you. We'll leave the chat going for a while, so if people want to share any information or talk to each other, I think that's okay, isn't it, Cherie, that we just leave the chat open for a little while, just for, say, 5 minutes, so that people can if they need to share anything more before we close it all down.
Yeah, should be fine. Thank you, Will.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.